So, an event recently took place in Sri Lanka involving a newspaper editor that has journalist Sampath Samarakun asking a pretty heavy question. Is the country's new government starting to walk down the same path as China when it comes to media freedom? Today, we're going to unpack his argument.
Okay, let's just dive right in with this quote from the article because it really gets to the core of the whole issue. The author is making it clear he sees this not as a simple investigation, but as an act of intimidation, because the verdict that the news was false seemed to be decided from the very beginning.
So what exactly happened here? Well, this whole debate in Samarakun's article really kicks off with one very specific incident, one that sent some serious shockwaves through Sri Lanka's media community.
Right, so the editor of the Aruna newspaper gets a summons from the CID. Now, that alone is noteworthy, but here's the detail that really caught the author's eye. The official letter was literally titled, "Regarding the False News." You know, not regarding an inquiry into potentially false news, but just false news. The author argues that this wording is everything. It implies guilt before the first question is even asked.
And this incident is what immediately led Sampath Samarakun to look east, drawing a direct parallel to a global superpower that's, while pretty notorious for its tight grip on the media. This comparison is really the foundation of his entire piece.
So let's look at this comparison side by side. On the one hand, in Sri Lanka, you have a summons over false news. On the other, in China, you have journalists being jailed for spreading false information. See the similarity? The author points out that the language is just chillingly close, and while the consequences are, for now, worlds apart, he argues that the basic idea, using the concept of falsehood to go after the press, is a tactic they share.
Now, to really show why this comparison is so serious, the article doesn't just stick to abstract ideas, it talks about people. Samarakun brings up specific cases of journalists in China to show us what this kind of policy looks like when it's taken to its absolute extreme.
First up, let's talk about the story of Zhang Zhan. She's a citizen journalist whose work ended up having a massive global impact.
So, what did she do that was so wrong? Well, she was a former lawyer who traveled to Wuhan right at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. And using nothing more than her smartphone, she started reporting on the chaos, on the reality on the ground, showing the world a version of the story that didn't always line up with the official one.
And how did the state respond to this? This is the crucial part. She wasn't charged with some specific reporting error. No, she was charged with picking quarrels and provoking trouble, a famously vague charge that can mean almost anything. And for that, she was sentenced to 4 years behind bars.
Then, the author brings up another journalist, Chen Zhuren, whose case highlights a totally different but equally concerning side of media suppression.
Chen's story is all about what happens when a journalist tries to hold power accountable. He published articles that exposed corruption by local officials. The response? His journalism was twisted and reframed as a bunch of criminal activities. Again, picking quarrels, but also blackmail and bribery. The result? A jaw-dropping 15-year prison sentence.
And as the article stresses, these cases aren't just random one-off events. They're what happens when you have a massive, high-tech, and incredibly sophisticated system that's designed from the ground up for total information control.
And look, if you need just one number to paint a picture of the media landscape in China, this is it. Reporters Without Borders ranks 180 countries in its World Press Freedom Index. In 2024, China's rank was 178. That's third from the very bottom.
A huge part of this control is the technology. You've probably heard of the Great Firewall. It's this enormous system of censorship that blocks thousands of foreign websites. We're talking Google, Twitter, Facebook, you name it. It basically creates a separate, highly monitored internet just for China. Samarakun's article uses a specific word to describe this reality, a word you've probably heard before, Orwellian. It's that idea of a state where there's total surveillance, total control, where the government tries to manage not just what people do, but what they say, and even what they think. Okay, so with all of that context about China's system laid out, the author brings the whole argument right back to where it started, Sri Lanka.
And here's the kicker, a new development that the author finds pretty alarming. Right around the same time as the editor's summons, the new Sri Lankan government apparently signed an agreement, an MOU, with China. And what was it for? Media development. Given everything we've just talked about, you can see why the author thinks the timing and the nature of that deal raises some serious questions.
And all of this brings us to the author's final, very pointed question, the one that's the title of his whole article.
With the similar language being used to target journalists, and with this new official partnership, he asks, is this the direction Sri Lanka is now heading?
Samarakun finishes his analysis with this simple but really powerful thought. He's quick to point out that the media in Sri Lanka isn't perfect and it absolutely should face criticism. But, and this is the important part, he insists that holding the media accountable has to happen through democratic and transparent ways, not through a summons from criminal investigators that presumes guilt. It's a final, urgent reminder of what's really at stake here. The fundamental principle that journalism, even when it's messy or critical or makes people uncomfortable, is not a crime.